Hello, and welcome to the third grade virtual learning series for English Language Arts Standard RL.3.4. The norms for today, you will be able to expect standards-based practice, skill building, and reading practice with the text. I'm counting on you to listen very intently, participate in each segment, and annotate as we progress. The agenda for today's session: I will review the learning target and goal, introduce the concepts and skills that align to the goal. I will also introduce a graphic organizer we'll be using. I'll model how to use that graphic organizer, and then we'll apply the concepts and skills that we have learned using the graphic organizer and the text. I'll leave you with some next steps of how to practice this standard. So the learning target for today is RL.3.4. Determine the meaning of words, phrases as they are used in text, distinguishing literal from non-literal language. So what we're going to focus on will be how we determine the meaning of those words and phrases. And of course, they will always be used in a text. That's a story, a passage, words that we see in a text. We're also going to distinguish from literal and non-literal language, and we will talk about that as well. So let's just get started with the very first section of our standard or our goal. Determine the meaning of words and phrases as they're used in a text. Well, how do we do that? Well, we are given context clues. And when you are reading something and you come up to a word that you do not know, don't stop reading. That's the key. You must keep reading because the words around it will help you figure out the meaning. And you might have to go back and reread a couple of times before you can determine the meaning. Well, there are many different kinds of context clues, and we're going to review each one of those. The very first one is when you're reading a sentence or a paragraph, it might provide a definition. For example, during the boat ride, Jessie became nauseated. She was very sick at her stomach. What does the word nauseated mean? Well, if you look back in the text, if we just read during the boat ride, Jessie became nauseated, we might not be able to determine what nauseated means. But once we keep reading, it told us what it meant. She was very sick at her stomach. So we determined nauseated means very sick at her stomach. Another type of context clue is that the sentence or paragraph might provide a synonym. And if you remember, a synonym is a word that means about the same. For example, the instructor or teacher modeled how to read music. Instructor means teacher because it told us instructor or teacher. So we determined instructor means teacher based on a synonym in the text. Okay, another type of context clue is a word might mean the opposite, or an antonym might be provided. For example, after falling into the river, my cell phone was damaged, but my friend's phone was like new. Well, after reading that, we know that our cell phone is damaged and the friend's is like new, so we can determine that damaged has to mean the opposite of like new. The sentence or paragraph you're reading might also provide an example. We saw many different species of animals in the Everglades, including alligators, snakes, and turtles. Species means, well, in the text it said species of animals, so we know it is a group of animals, and then it gave us a list of animals in the Everglades. So we can determine species means different types of animals. A sentence or paragraph could also provide an explanation of what the word means. For example, Betty couldn't decide on a fabric for her dress. There were too many beautiful pieces of cloth. Fabric is the word that we need to decide what it means. If we only read, Betty couldn't decide on a fabric for her dress, you might not be able to determine the meaning. But once we continued to read, it said there were too many beautiful pieces of cloth. Well, pieces of cloth refers to fabric, so we can determine fabric means pieces of cloth. Word parts can be used as clues to determine meaning as well. For example, Nikki was unsure of the time for the party. Unsure is the word. We know un is a prefix. Un means not, so we can determine unsure means not sure. Don't forget word parts. Those are the prefixes and suffixes. If we can understand and know what prefixes and suffixes mean, then we can decide on what that word means that we're trying to figure out in the text. Don't forget, too, that pictures can be used as clues to determine meaning. For example, the title of the story is The Dragon, but the picture that accompanies the title is of a dragonfly. So if I asked you, what do you think dragon refers to? Of course, you're going to look at the picture and think, okay, it's not a dragon, it is a dragonfly. So don't forget to always look at the pictures because they hold clues to the story as well. Okay, so going back to our goal or the standard, we have talked about how to determine the meaning of words and phrases as they're used in a text, but we also need to distinguish literal from non-literal language. Well, what is that? Literal means exactly how it's written. Non-literal does not mean how it's written. It has a different meaning. For example, I could say, it is raining very hard outside. That is literal. It means exactly what I said. But I could also say, it is raining like cats and dogs. Is it actually raining cats and dogs? No, it just means it's raining very hard. That is non-literal. It has a different meaning. Another example of literal, my backpack is heavy. That is exactly how it is written. That means exactly what it says. I could also say, my backpack weighs a ton. There's no way your backpack could weigh a ton. It just means it's very heavy. So as we're trying to determine meaning of words and phrases in a text, don't forget there will be things that are written literally and things that are written non-literally, which means it just has a different meaning. And we have to figure that out. So today we're going to use a thinking map or a graphic organizer. This thinking map has listed at the top all the context clues that we have just talked about. Use this as a reference as we're going through text and we're reading words and we're trying to figure out meaning. Don't forget these types. It could be a definition is provided. There could be an example provided for us. A word part, all the prefixes and suffixes. Don't forget, if we can break the word down, maybe we could figure out the meaning. Pictures are included in the text. They might give us a clue. Synonyms, words that mean about the same, or antonyms, words that mean the opposite. Okay? So what we'll do is we will list our target words or phrases on the first line. Then we'll go back to the text to find all the clues. At that point, we will come up with our own definition. You should be able to use the definition that we come up with and replace it in the text where the word is, and it makes sense. Okay, so let's practice. I'll read the following text. Is it ridiculous for a very small, sickly, big-eared mouse to fall in love with a beautiful human princess named P? The question is, What is the meaning of sickly in the phrase for a very small, sickly, big-eared mouse? Well, let's look. If we go to that word, do we know any part of that word? Well, we do. We know sick, and it has the suffix "ly." So let's go to our graphic organizer. Our target word is sickly. Write that word on your graphic organizer. The clues we determined has a suffix "ly." It means full of. And we knew the base word or the root word sick. So we can determine that the mouse is not healthy or is sick. The mouse is not healthy. Okay? Let's try again. I'll read the following text. Furlough happened to scurry past the princess's room, moving his head left to right, right to left, back and forth quickly. Question. What does the word scurry mean as it's used in the sentence? We'll always go back to the text and let's reread. Furlough happened to scurry past the princess's room, moving his head left to right, right to left, back and forth quickly. Well, if we continue to read after scurry, we notice that he moved his head left to right, right to left, very quickly. So on our graphic organizer, our target word is scurry, right scurry. The clues, he was moving his head quickly. So we can determine that scurry means he was either running or moving very fast. Now it's your turn. I will read the following text and the question. I will pause and allow you to try to determine the meaning of the underlined word or words. Cripes, said Furlough. He stopped. He stared into the princess's room. His whiskers became tight as bowstrings. What meaning does the phrase, his whiskers became as tight as bowstrings, add to the reader's understanding about what happened to Furlough's whiskers? Okay, so we had to look back at his whiskers became as tight as bowstrings. Now I want you to think about what you know about a bow and the string on a bow. It is very tight. It is not loose. So I want you to compare that to his whiskers. So our target word or words, and in this case is a phrase, his whiskers became tight as bowstrings. The clues are we know bowstrings are very tight. They cannot be loose. So we can determine his whiskers were very stiff or very straight. They were stuck straight out, very tight. Now, in reviewing this standard, I want you to remember there are context clues that help you unlock the meaning of words that you do not know. You have to go back and reread to determine what clues will help you. Also, you'll have to decide on what's the appropriate definition because there are many words that have more than one meaning, but it has to be able to fit in that text and make sense. We talked about literal and non-literal. Literal means exactly what is written. Non-literal, it does not mean exactly how it's written. It has a different meaning. Figurative language is one of those types of non-literal types of language. Also, you need to be able to use the meaning of the word in the passage and it makes sense. So as you're reading text from now on, I want you to always read all the words around it and look for clues. So your next steps, I've attached the text that I used today, or you can go find another piece of text. I want you to look for and locate and circle as many words that you're not familiar with. Then use the thinking map or the graphic organizer that we used and what you learned in this video on how to determine the meaning of each word. And I want you to complete your graphic organizer. So the documents I used were the thinking map or the graphic organizer and the text. These pieces are included with this lesson. So I'd like to thank you for actively listening today and participating in the BEG English Language Arts Virtual Learning Series.